Hey guys, in today's video I bring a story that will deeply affect you all. Imagine being on the brink of death and being taken to a world where the truth about Earth's future is shockingly revealed. This is exactly what happened to Orion Everhart, who during a near-death experience had apocalyptic visions and a frightening warning of what is to come. Get ready for an exciting and revealing journey. And before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, and activate the bell so you don't miss any content like this. Let's explore the mysteries of this incredible experience together. Hello, my name is Orion Everhart. I have a story to tell, a story that completely changed my life and my perception of the world. It all started in 1974, when I was just 19 years old, about to turn 20. I was an ordinary young man from Portland, Oregon, full of dreams and eager to explore the world. At that time, my biggest passion was my motorcycle. She represented freedom, adventure, and the promise of endless discovery on Oregon's winding roads. Portland has always been my home, despite the often humid and foggy weather. There was something about the atmosphere of the city that captivated me, perhaps the mix of urbanity and nature, or perhaps just the comfortable familiarity of growing up in a place. I worked at a local auto repair shop, spent my free time with friends, and planned motorcycle trips whenever possible. My best friend was Milo Chambers. We met in high school, and since then we were inseparable. We shared the same passion for motorcycles and adventures on the road. Together we explored every corner of Oregon our bikes could reach. Milo was the kind of friend who was always there, whether to celebrate victories or to support me in difficult times. I was a pretty typical young man for the time. I liked rock and roll, spent hours tuning my bike, and dreamed of the day I could travel across the entire country. He wasn't particularly religious or spiritual. To be honest, I had never thought much about the afterlife or deeper existential questions. My life philosophy was simple: live in the moment, enjoy your youth, and don't worry too much about the future. Life seemed to be just beginning for me. I had plans to maybe go to college eventually, or maybe open my own motorcycle shop. But at that moment, I was content to live day to day, enjoying the freedom of youth and the excitement of the open roads. Little did I know that on August 2nd, 1974, just 5 days before my 20th birthday, my life would change forever. What I'm about to tell you may seem unbelievable, perhaps even impossible, but I can assure you that every word is true, every detail vivid in my memory as if it happened yesterday. This is the story of how a simple motorcycle trip took me on a journey beyond this world, revealing secrets that not even the deepest dreams could contain. It's the story of how I died and came back. It was Friday, August 2nd, 1974. The day started like any other, but there was an energy in the air, a feeling that something important was about to happen. Maybe it was just the excitement of the trip Milo and I had planned, or maybe it was a foreboding of the fate that awaited me. I finished my shift at the workshop in the late afternoon and met up with Milo at our favorite cafe. The place was full. The buzz of conversation and the aroma of fresh coffee filled the air. We sat at our usual table near the window where we could see our motorbikes parked outside. "So man, ready for the big trip tomorrow?" Milo asked, a wide smile on his face. I nodded, feeling the adrenaline start to flow just thinking about the journey ahead of us. "I can't wait. It'll be amazing to get out of the city for a few days." We spent the next hour discussing our plans. The idea was to leave Portland early Saturday afternoon, head north towards Perth. It was a route we had done before, but each trip was a new adventure. "Hey, I almost forgot," Milo said suddenly, grabbing something from his backpack. It was a small wrapped package. "Happy early birthday, man." I was surprised. My birthday wasn't for another 5 days, and I didn't expect Milo to remember, much less give me a gift. I opened the package to find a new pair of motorcycle gloves. "Wow, thanks, Milo," I exclaimed, trying on the gloves. "They fit perfectly." "I thought you could use it on the trip," he said, looking pleased with himself. That moment, that simple act of friendship, would be etched in my memory forever. Little did I know that it would be one of the last normal memories I would have for a long time. We left the cafe as the sun began to set, dyeing the Portland sky in shades of orange and pink. I returned home, checked my bike one last time, and went to bed early, looking forward to the next day's journey. On Saturday morning, I woke up to the sun streaming through the window. I had a quick breakfast, did one last check of my backpack, and headed out to meet Milo. The day was surprisingly clear for Portland, as if the sky itself was giving us its blessing for the trip. We met at the agreed point, and after a quick check of our bikes, we set off. We crossed the Fremont Bridge, the wind in our faces, the roar of the engines sounding like music to our ears. The feeling of freedom was intoxicating. The hours flew by as we traveled the roads, only stopping to refuel and take short breaks. As the day progressed, the sky began to change. Dark clouds were forming on the horizon, and I could feel the air getting colder. By the time we got close to Glenfarg, it was already getting dark. The road became narrower and more winding, flanked by dense forests that seemed to swallow up the remaining daylight. I was in front, with Milo right behind. That's when it happened. As I rounded a sharp bend, my headlights illuminated something in the road. An animal, perhaps. Instinctively, I swerved. It was a mistake. I felt the bike skidding, losing control. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion and in the blink of an eye at the same time. I saw the headlights of a car coming in the opposite direction, bright and blinding. I heard Milo scream, the sound of tires skidding on the asphalt. Then came the impact. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. I was thrown from the bike, flying through the air before hitting the ground with a force that knocked all the air from my lungs. I rolled several times, feeling every stone, every irregularity in the asphalt. When I finally stopped, I was lying on my back, looking up at the night sky. The pain was excruciating, radiating from my wrist and right leg. The smell of gasoline and burning rubber filled the air. I heard distant voices, screams, the sound of running footsteps. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't respond. My vision began to darken at the edges, and a feeling of intense cold spread through me. Fear gripped me when I realized what was happening. I was dying. My last conscious thought was of Milo. I hope he's okay, I thought. Then the darkness swallowed me, and I was plunged into a deep, silent void. The pain, which a few moments ago seemed unbearable, began to disappear. It was as if someone was slowly turning a dial, decreasing the intensity of all physical sensations. My body awareness, so vivid during the accident, began to dissipate like fog in the morning sun. I found myself floating in an absolute void. There was no light, no sound, no tactile sensation. It was like being suspended in nothingness, weightless, shapeless. At first, this total absence of stimuli was disconcerting. I tried to move, to scream, to do anything to break the oppressive silence. But there was nothing to move me, no voice to scream. In this void, I began to lose track of who I was. The memories of Orion Everhart, the young man from Portland who loved motorcycles and was about to turn 20, felt distant, as if they belonged to someone else. My identity was disintegrating, dissolving into that dark expanse. Time has lost all meaning. I can't tell if I was in that state for seconds, hours, or years. The sensation was of an eternity compressed into an instant. There was no longer past or future, just an infinite and empty present. At some point, and to this day I can't say when exactly, I realized that I was no longer alone in that darkness. It wasn't something I could see or hear in the traditional sense. It was more like a presence I felt, a consciousness that seemed to surround mine. Then I heard a voice. But listen is not the right word. The voice didn't come from outside. It wasn't a sound that reached my ears. It resonated within me, as if every atom of my being vibrated in tune with it. There were no words in the conventional sense, but I understood perfectly well what was being communicated. The voice, or presence, or whatever it was, conveyed a sense of deep calm and understanding. I felt like my entire existence was being seen and accepted, every moment of joy and sadness, every triumph and failure. There was no judgment, just an unconditional acceptance that made me feel indescribable relief. I started to feel like I was moving. It wasn't a physical movement, as I no longer had a body in the traditional sense. It was more like my consciousness was being pulled upward, away from that dark void. As it rose, I began to hear a sound. Unlike the voice I had experienced before, this sound seemed to come from all directions at once. It was a low hum at first, but it gradually increased in intensity. The sound had a rhythm, a pulse that resembled a beating heart, but much more complex and multifaceted. As the sound grew louder, I began to see lights. At first, they were just tiny points of light in the darkness, like distant stars. But soon they became brighter and began to move, forming complex patterns that seemed to dance to the rhythm of the sound I heard. The sensation of movement intensified. It was like being carried by an invisible current, faster and faster, towards something I couldn't fully understand but knew was important. Suddenly I was thrown out of that current. The darkness disappeared completely, and I found myself in a place that defied description based on my previous experience. It was a space, but not in the physical sense we know. There were no walls, floor, or ceiling, or it was more like a pulsating energy field full of light and color. The lights I had seen before were now everywhere, moving in complex patterns that seemed to contain deep meanings that I couldn't fully decipher. The sound I heard now seemed to be an integral part of this space. It was not something separate from light or colors, but rather a different manifestation of the same energy. Everything was interconnected, pulsing in a perfect harmony that left me in awe. At that moment, I had a sudden, overwhelming realization. I was no longer in the world I knew. I had crossed some kind of threshold, entered a reality that went beyond anything I thought possible. And surprisingly, I didn't feel scared. On the contrary, I felt intense curiosity and a sense that I was about to discover something vitally important. I was ready to explore this new realm, eager to understand what it all meant and why I was there. Little did I know that the revelations that were to come would change my understanding of the universe and myself forever. As I adjusted to this new environment, I began to realize that the space around me was much more than just a static backdrop. It was a living, pulsating entity that reacted to my presence and my thoughts. Every movement of my consciousness caused ripples in the lights and colors around me, as if the entire environment was an extension of my being. The lights that surrounded me were not simple bright spots. They had depth, texture, and a quality that I can only describe as alive. Some seemed to flow like rivers of light, others pulsed like cosmic hearts. There were patterns within patterns, infinite fractals that unfolded before my eyes, even though I had no physical eyes at that time. The sound that permeated everything was not just audible, it was almost tangible. I could feel the vibrations passing through my consciousness, each note carrying meanings and emotions that went beyond words. It was as if the music of the universe was being played, and I was both the listener and part of the orchestra. As I moved, or perhaps it would be more accurate to say, as my consciousness expanded, in this space I began to realize that there was no clear distinction between me and the environment around me. The boundaries that normally define our individuality seemed to have dissolved. I was as much a part of this space as it was a part of me. I tried to understand where I was, but the concepts of location and direction that I knew didn't apply there. There was no above or below, left or right. It was as if all directions existed simultaneously, and I could perceive them all at the same time. In the midst of this surreal experience, I began to notice that there were structures in this space. They were not physical objects as we know them, but concentrations of energy and information that seemed to have purpose and meaning. Some of these structures resembled buildings made of pure light. Others felt like vast oceans of knowledge that I could dive into. Driven by an irresistible curiosity, I approached one of these structures. As I got closer, I felt a wave of information flowing into my consciousness. They were not words or images, but instantaneous and complete understandings. In a matter of seconds, if time even existed there, I absorbed what felt like years of knowledge. It was overwhelming. I learned about the nature of reality, about the invisible connections that connect all things, about dimensions beyond those we know. I saw the web of life stretching not just across the earth, but across the entire cosmos. I understood that the universe was not just matter and energy, but also consciousness and purpose. As I tried to process all of this, I realized I wasn't alone in this space. There were other presences around me, entities of pure light and energy that seemed as curious about me as I was about them. There was no fear or discomfort in their presence, just a feeling of mutual recognition and acceptance. One of these entities approached me. It had no defined shape, it was more like a field of light energy. But I could feel an intention, a personality behind that light. And then something happened that changed everything. We started communicating. Communicating with the being of light was unlike anything I had ever experienced. There were no spoken or written words, not even images or gestures. It was a direct exchange of thoughts and feelings, a merging of minds that transcended any linguistic or cultural barrier. In an instant, I felt a wave of welcome and acceptance coming from the entity. It was as if she was saying, "Welcome, brother," without using words. Along with this greeting came a deep understanding of the nature of this being. I was not a stranger, but a familiar part of a large cosmic family to which I also belonged. I tried to introduce myself, explain who I was and where I came from, but before I could formulate these thoughts, I realized that the being already knew everything about me. My whole life, my hopes, fears, joys, and sorrows were open to him like a book. And the most surprising thing is that there was no judgment, just infinite understanding and compassion. The being began to share with me knowledge and perspectives that went far beyond my earthly understanding. I saw the history of the universe unfold before me, from the Big Bang to the present moment. I understood how each particle, each atom, each living being was interconnected in a cosmic web of relationships. I experienced life on other planets in other dimensions. I saw civilizations that existed billions of years before the Earth was formed, and others that will only emerge in the distant future. I understood that life in its infinite varieties was the rule in the universe, not the exception. The concept of time as we know it has lost its meaning. Past, present, and future seem to coexist in an eternal now. I saw how our actions in the present could influence the past and shape the future, all part of a grand cosmic plan that I was barely beginning to understand. In the midst of this flow of information, I felt a wave of unconditional love coming from the being of light. It was not just directed at me, but at all of creation. I understood that this love was the fundamental force of the universe, what kept everything together and moving. I tried to ask questions. Why was I there? What was the purpose of all this? The being responded, but not with simple explanations. Instead, he showed me how each life, each experience, was an essential part of the great cosmic tapestry. Each of us had a unique and irreplaceable role in the universe. As the communication continued, I realized that I was not just a passive receiver of information. My own thoughts and emotions were being heard and responded to. It was a true dialogue, a mutual exchange that made me feel truly understood for the first time in my life. The being of light showed me how our lives on Earth were just a small part of a much larger journey. I saw my past lives and possible future lives, understanding how each experience contributed to the growth of my soul. In a moment of clarity, I asked about the accident. Why had it happened? The being didn't respond directly, but it made me see how that event, no matter how traumatic it was part of a greater plan. It was not a punishment or a punishment, but an opportunity for growth and transformation. As the communication deepened, I felt my consciousness expanding even further. It was as if the barriers between me and the being of light were dissolving. I began to see and feel through his perspective, experiencing a unity that went beyond anything I could have imagined. In this state of union, I understood that I was not just communicating with one being, but with a collective consciousness, a universal mind of which we were all a part. It was an experience of totality, of connection with everything that exists. As I absorbed these revelations, I felt a subtle shift in the environment around me. The being of light seemed to be guiding me into a new phase of experience, something even deeper and more transformative. I didn't know what to expect, but I was ready for whatever came next, eager to discover more about the mysteries of the universe and my place in it. As communication with the being of light intensified, I felt an irresistible pull toward him. It was as if 2 drops of water were approaching, ready to become one. There was no fear or hesitation, just a sense that this was natural, even inevitable. The moment we merged, it was as if an entire universe exploded within my consciousness. The feeling is almost impossible to describe in human words, but I will try. Imagine expanding infinitely in all directions at once, feeling every particle of the cosmos as part of you. Now multiply that sensation by infinity, and you will have a vague idea of what I experienced. In this state of union, there was no longer any distinction between I and the being of light. We were a single entity, a unified consciousness that spanned vast expanses of time and space. The light being's memories and experiences became mine, and mine became his. It was a complete fusion of minds, souls, and essences. The love I had felt before was now amplified exponentially. It was a love that transcended any human conception, a love that was the very essence of the universe. I understood that this love was the creative force behind all existence, the energy that moved galaxies and gave life to stars. In this state of union, I began to experience deep introspection. I saw my entire life unfold before me, not as a linear series of events, but as an integrated whole. Every moment, every decision, every interaction was examined not with judgment, but with a deep and compassionate understanding. I saw how my actions affected not just myself, but everyone around me, creating ripples that rippled through the fabric of the universe. I understood that every thought, every word, every act of kindness or cruelty had consequences that went far beyond what I could imagine. At the same time, I experienced the perspective of the being of light. I saw countless lives, countless worlds, countless realities. I understood that what we call life and death are just transitions in an eternal journey of evolution and growth. During this fusion, I received knowledge that was beyond human understanding. I understood the mechanisms of karma, not as a system of reward and punishment, but as a natural law of balance and learning. I saw how our choices in one life shaped our experiences in others, all part of a grand plan of spiritual evolution. I experienced the nature of time in a completely new way. I saw that the past, present, and future existed simultaneously, and that what we perceived as a linear progression of time was just an illusion created by our limited minds. Amidst this vastness of knowledge and experience, I felt a search. The being of light, which was now me too, was searching for something within me. It was not an invasion, but a gentle and respectful exploration. I understood that there was a purpose for this merger, something important that needed to be discovered or accomplished. As the search continued, I began to feel a sense of responsibility growing within me. It wasn't a burden, but an understanding that I had an important role to play, something only I could do. Then, like a flash of clarity amidst this ocean of expanded consciousness, I saw something. It was a vision of the future, not just of my life, but of the entire world. And what I saw left me simultaneously amazed and terrified. The fusion began to slowly unravel, but the sense of unity remained. As I returned to a more individualized form of consciousness, I knew nothing would be the same. I had experienced something beyond human understanding, something that would change the course of my life forever. As the separation was complete, I felt a wave of immense gratitude for the being of light. No words or thoughts were needed. Gratitude was an intrinsic part of our shared being. And along with this gratitude came the certainty that, although we were separating, we would never truly be apart. Now, I was ready for the next stage of my journey, carrying with me the lessons and revelations of this extraordinary merger. What would come next, I didn't know. but I was prepared to face it with a new perspective and a deeper understanding of the universe and my place in it. As the feeling of merging with the being of light began to subside, a new experience took hold of my consciousness. It was as if I was being transported through time and space, watching Earth's future events unfold. The first thing I noticed was a drastic change in the planet's climate. I saw storms of an intensity I had never witnessed before. Mammoth hurricanes swept through coastal cities, while devastating tornadoes cut through once fertile plains. Ocean levels had risen significantly, swallowing entire islands and flooding large coastal areas. In other regions, I saw prolonged droughts turning green lands into deserts. Entire forests were on fire, the fire consuming everything in its path with terrifying veracity. Smoke from these fires covered vast areas of the sky, obscuring the sun and creating an even more chaotic atmosphere. But it wasn't just natural disasters that I witnessed. I saw conflicts spreading across the globe, wars over increasingly scarce resources. People fought for clean water, farmable land, and breathable air. Disputes were no longer just between nations, but between communities, between neighbors. Society as I knew it was disintegrating. I saw masses of climate refugees moving across continents, seeking safe places to live. Cities that were once symbols of progress now struggled to keep basic services running. In the midst of this chaos, I noticed something even more disturbing. There was a dark force behind many of these events. It wasn't something physical, but an evil presence that seemed to feed on people's fear and suffering. I understood that this force was manipulating events, exacerbating conflicts, and accelerating the destruction of the planet. I was horrified by what I saw, feeling a deep sadness for humanity and all life on Earth. But then, something changed in the vision. In the midst of the darkness, I began to see points of light. They were people, individuals and groups who, even in the face of adversity, maintained hope and worked tirelessly to make a difference. I saw communities coming together to adapt to climate change, scientists developing new technologies to clean up the environment, leaders inspiring others to act with compassion and wisdom. And then, I realized that I wasn't just observing these events. Somehow I was connected to them. I felt that my actions, my choices, could influence the course of that future. At that moment, a powerful presence manifested itself in my vision. He was an angelic figure, imposing and radiant. Its light was so intense that it almost overshadowed everything around it, but at the same time, it was comforting and welcoming. The angel addressed me, not with words, but with direct mind-to-mind communication. He explained that what I was seeing was a cosmic battle between light and dark forces. Natural disasters and human conflicts were, in part, physical manifestations of this spiritual struggle. Dark forces, the angel explained, were trying to turn the earth into a place of suffering and chaos. They fed on human fear and despair, using climate change and conflict as tools to sow more darkness in the world. But the angel also showed me that hope was not lost. The points of light that I had seen were courageous souls who, consciously or not, were aligned with the forces of light. Every act of kindness, every choice out of love and compassion, strengthened the light side in this cosmic battle. The angel revealed to me that my near-death experience was not an accident. I had been chosen to witness this vision of the future and return with a message of hope and a call to action. As I absorbed these revelations, the angel began to show me more. I saw beyond the hard times, to a more distant future where humanity had overcome its trials. I saw a renewed world, where people lived in harmony with each other and with nature. Technology and spirituality had come together, creating a civilization that respected all forms of life. But the angel made it clear that this future was not guaranteed. It was just a possibility, dependent on the choices humanity would make in the crucial years to come. As the vision came to an end, I felt an immense responsibility weighing on me. I had been entrusted with precious knowledge and now had to decide what to do with it. As soon as the vision of the future dissipated, I felt a strong tug. It was as if an invisible string was pulling me back, away from that realm of light and knowledge. In an instant, all the expansion and freedom I had experienced began to compress. The feeling was disconcerting. I was leaving behind a vastness of consciousness and returning to the confines of a physical body. The vibrant colors and celestial music that surrounded me began to fade, replaced by more mundane sounds and an oppressive darkness. Suddenly the pain returned. It was no longer the sharp, unbearable pain from the moment of the accident, but a constant throbbing that seemed to come from every part of my body. I felt the weight of my limbs, the stiffness of my muscles, the roughness of the hospital sheets against my skin. The sounds around me became clearer. I heard the rhythmic beeping of machines, the distant murmur of voices, the soft thud of footsteps in the hallway. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt too heavy. Finally, with an effort that seemed Herculean, I managed to open my eyes. The light was blinding, and it took me a few seconds to adjust. Little by little, my surroundings came into focus. I was in a hospital room, surrounded by medical equipment. A nurse was at my bedside, her eyes widening in surprise when she realized I was awake. "He's awake!" she shouted, turning to call a doctor. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and my voice wouldn't come out. The nurse came over, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Calm down, darling," she said. "You're at Bridge of Erne Hospital in Perth. You've been in a serious accident, but you're going to be okay." Her words seemed distant, almost unreal compared to the experience I had just had. I wanted to tell her, tell everyone, about what I had seen and learned. But how could I begin to explain something so vast, so beyond normal comprehension? The doctor entered the room and began examining me, asking questions that I could barely process. My mind was a mess, torn between the physical world around me and the vivid memories of my journey beyond this world. As the doctor talked about fractures, bruises, and the long recovery process that lay ahead, I asked myself how I could reconcile these two very different realities. How could I go back to my normal life after having experienced something so extraordinary? As the days passed and I slowly recovered, the intensity of my experience did not lessen. Every detail remained vivid in my mind, as real as the hospital room around me. I knew I had been changed forever, but I still didn't fully understand how or why. In the days and weeks that followed my awakening in the hospital, I found myself in a constant internal battle. On the one hand, there was the physical reality of my injured body, the pain of the fractures, the slow recovery from the trauma of the accident. On the other, there was the vivid and insistent memory of my experience beyond this world. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see that space of light and energy again, feel the presence of the beings of light, relive the fusion with that greater consciousness. The vision of Earth's future, with its challenges and possibilities, continued to haunt me. The doctors and nurses took care of my body, but they had no idea of the storm going on in my mind. How could I begin to explain what had happened to me? Who would believe that in the minutes I was clinically dead, I had experienced an eternity? My parents and Milo visited me regularly. They were relieved that I was alive, grateful for my recovery, but I could see the worry in their eyes. Something in me had changed, and they could feel it, even if they didn't understand what it was. One night, when I was alone in my room, I tried to tell a nurse about my experience. She listened patiently, but I could see in her eyes that she didn't really believe it. To her, it was probably just the delirium of a traumatized patient, perhaps side effects of the medication. I then realized that I couldn't just go around telling everyone about what I had experienced. People would see me as crazy, or worse, they might try to convince me that it was all just a hallucination. But I knew, with a certainty that went beyond any rational doubt, that my experience had been real. The knowledge I had gained, the visions of the future I had witnessed, weighed on me like an immense burden. I felt an overwhelming responsibility. If what I had seen was true, the future of humanity was in danger. But how could I do anything about it? Who would believe me? As my physical recovery progressed, this internal struggle intensified. I was eager to get out of the hospital, to get back into the world, but at the same time, I was afraid of what I would find outside. How could I resume my normal life after everything I had experienced? I began to have nightmares about the visions of the future I had witnessed. I saw flooded cities, burning forests, people fighting for basic resources. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart was racing, feeling the weight of the responsibility that had been entrusted to me. During the day, I found myself looking out the hospital window, watching people passing by on the street, living their normal lives, with no idea what challenges the future held. I wanted to scream, to warn them, but I knew I couldn't. During the long hours of solitude in the hospital room, I began to plan what I would do when I got out. I knew I couldn't just ignore what I had learned, but I also knew I needed to be cautious. The world was not ready to hear the whole truth at once. I decided that I needed to learn more, study, better understand the problems the world was facing. Maybe, I thought, I could find subtle ways to make a difference, to influence people in the right direction without revealing the source of my knowledge. As the day of my discharge approached, I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. I knew that my life would never be the same, that the path ahead would be difficult and lonely. But I also knew I had no choice. I had been chosen for a mission, and I was determined to carry it out, no matter the cost. Today, years after that fateful motorcycle trip, I still struggle to find the right words to describe my experience. Time has passed, but the memories remain as vivid as the day I woke up in that hospital room. My physical recovery was long and difficult, but the spiritual and emotional journey that followed was even more challenging. I returned home to Portland, but nothing felt the same. The familiar streets, the faces of my friends and family, everything felt different somehow, like I was seeing the world through a new lens. In the first few months after my return, I struggled to readapt to normal life. How could I worry about bills, work, or relationships when I had experienced the vastness of the universe and glimpsed the future of humanity? But little by little, I understood that it was exactly in the little, everyday things that I could start to make a difference. I started studying intensely. Books about the environment, politics, spirituality, quantum physics, anything that could help me better understand what I had experienced and how I could use that knowledge to help. I went back to college, changed my field of study, determined to acquire the skills and knowledge needed to make a real difference in the world. Over the years, I've found subtle ways to share what I've learned. I became active in environmental causes, participated in community groups, gave talks on the importance of ecological awareness and compassion. I never revealed the true source of my knowledge, but I used every opportunity to plant seeds of change. There were moments of doubt, of course. Moments in which I wondered if everything had been just an elaborate dream, a hallucination caused by the trauma of the accident. But then I would remember the feeling of being merged with that greater consciousness, the unconditional love I experienced, the clarity with which I saw the future unfold before me, and I knew it was real. The weight of knowledge I carry is not always easy to bear. There are days when I look at the news, see the signs of climate change intensifying, conflicts spreading across the world, and I feel a deep despair. But then I remember the vision of hope I was also shown, of humanity's potential to overcome even the greatest challenges. Today, as I share my story with you, I do so with a mix of apprehension and hope. Apprehension because I know that many will not believe it, that some may even see me as crazy. But hope because I know that for some, these words can resonate on a deep level, awakening something within them. I don't ask you to blindly believe me. I only ask that you listen with an open mind, that you consider the possibility that there is more to this universe than we can see or touch. And most of all, I ask you to look at the world around you with new eyes, to see the interconnectedness of all things, to understand the impact that each of our actions has on the whole. The future I saw is not inevitable. It is a wake-up call, a call to action. Each of us has the power to make a difference, to tip the scales in favor of the light, whether through small acts of kindness, conscious choices in our daily lives, or larger actions that inspire change in our community and the world. As I write these words, I feel again that loving presence that I experienced during my journey beyond this world. I feel like I'm fulfilling a part of the purpose I was brought back for. And to you, who have read this far, I leave a request. Do not ignore the call of your heart. You also have an important role to play in this great tapestry of life. The path ahead may feel scary and uncertain, but remember, we are not alone on this journey. There are forces greater than we can imagine working on our behalf. All we need to do is take the first step, with courage and love in our hearts. My near-death experience taught me that life is precious, that every moment is an opportunity to make a difference. Don't wait for a miracle or a transcendental experience to start acting. The miracle is life itself, and each of us has the power to make it extraordinary. Thank you for listening to my story. May she be a light on your path, just as my experience was a light on mine.